Dementia residents are used to not being told the truth because people think, well, they won't remember, so it doesn't matter. But actually, people with dementia have an antennae for the truth. They intuit it, they feel it, they pick it up. And this actually was brought home to me in the thinking workshops that we developed at the dementia unit that I worked at. And we were working on Shakespeare, because with their past memory often intact, we could tap in to those school days of old. So Hamlet again, I think it was Hamlet, the famous quote, "Honesty is the best policy." So we were discussing this, and the dementia residents really fired up at this point. And, they said, that if we're to be heard, we have to tell the truth. We need to be honest. So with this, I sort of went into the detail of this, and some very interesting things came out. There was actually one resident there called Fran. I've referred to her before. She was the one who, such an eloquent, lovely lady, all day long, she spoke Shakespeare. Yes, it was actually really interesting for us because Shakespeare's fascinating. She'd speak Shakespeare all day long. And I asked her, how is it that you speak Shakespeare? How can you speak Shakespeare, to such a degree? And she said, my father loved Shakespeare, and every night at dinner time we had to speak Shakespeare all the time. And I haven't forgotten it. And she didn't. So this beautiful Shakespeare was just resonating all day long throughout the unit. And that's how we picked up on those Shakespeare quotes and had the workshop, and it became, it came to pass that many of the other residents could recognise, remember, and at least speak to Shakespeare because they'd studied it all, especially Hamlet, in their school days, and so they could think back to that. So anyway, in terms of the truth, we'd done a few Shakespeare workshops, and this one particular was the first one we'd done on honesty or anything like it. So I put up honesty is the truth. No, not honest. Honesty is the best policy, sorry. And actually, I'd sort of forgotten about this, to be honest, until last night. I actually went through some notes that I'd kept on the Hamlet workshop, and in faint writing at the back of it, I discovered these other quotes. And I wasn't sure whether they were Shakespearean quotes or quotes from the residents. This was just last night. I'll just read one out to you. So this is from Fran. It's a bit light here. If you don't tell the truth, you turn into a perpetual liar and no one trusts you. Now, I thought that must be Shakespeare. It was so deep. I'll just read that again. If you don't tell the truth, you turn into a perpetual liar and no one trusts you. Look at that. That's just so profound. And I think what was happening in recollection, just last night I was thinking this through. I think that what was happening is because she was oiling her memory and her thinking with Shakespeare all day long, I think it was just oiling, not just her thinking, but her intellect, her concentration, her focus, her depth of thinking. She was actually tapping into depth of thinking, which happened with all the residents, with the workshops ongoingly. But I didn't realise at the time that she already had that depth of thinking from Shakespeare, as we all get when we have to think about Shakespeare, because the intellect is still working, even though the mind has failed. So that marvellous quote, I thought, wow. You'll turn into a perpetual liar and no one trusts you if you don't tell the truth. I mean, she didn't say this out loud to the unit. None of the nurses or anyone heard about it. She just said it quietly at the workshop, and I just happened to note it down. And then the other thing she said is, and this is all here, this is on this, all my notes that I wrote. This was years ago when we did Hamlet at the end of December 2015. So the other thing she said was, you can think yourself into it. Now again, I thought last night, sure, that's just there at the edge of the page. Surely, that's Shakespeare. you can think yourself into it. But no, well, as far as I know, unless any of you out there can tell me otherwise, please. I Googled it, nothing there on that. You can think yourself into it. Perfect. Perfect. Which is exactly what we did. I mean, you know, these people were thinking slow at the start, Fran being the big one and pretty much the only one that was thinking it. But no, sorry, delete that. The others were thinking, but not to the depth that she was thinking, except for one other resident, Jane, who I also, you know, different name, mention in the book. And she said, she was the one that said, if you want the truth, you have to speak it out. If you want the truth, you have to speak it out. She was very assertive. She couldn't stand it if someone lied to her. She couldn't stand it. She'd scream and shout and kick and, you're a liar, you're a liar. Oh, she did that to me 2 or 3 times, I have to say. I mean, I had never lied to her, but she considered that I had because others had lied to her at the time. And this is what happens. One person lies to one resident and then they think that everyone's lying to them. That's the big problem with lying. It just spreads like wildfire through the unit. And then you've got others saying that people have lied to them. And then you've got the, you know, often a whole team of people at the front desk shouting out that they're being lied to. How do you de-escalate that? That's why it's so important to please not lie to dementia residents, even white lies, you know, because it has such an impact and it's so difficult. You know, with this one woman, Jane, who was yelling and screaming at me, saying I was lying, the amount of extra time, effort, energy, it took days to be able to de-escalate her enough for her to then trust that I wasn't lying to her. I had to explain the whole, look, Jane, you know perfectly well, I'm not lying to you. You know, I've spent all this time with you. I've spent extra time with you. I've spent hours of extra time with you. Yes, I know that. Well, I wouldn't be spending hours of extra time with you, going through all this, you know, speaking to you honestly, taking you for walks, doing all your note cards, writing all these things on the cards for you so that you can get your thinking back. Yes, I know. And I'd have to go over and over and over, you know, all of this in the book, first 2 chapters. And, you know, finally she settled down, but oh boy, it was a big deal. And I wasn't sure whether I would be able to turn the tables, but finally I did. And after that, you know, it worked. It worked until someone else told a lie to her, which wasn't that much after that, thankfully. But with other residents that are lied to, just white lies, aren't they? Little lies like I'll be back in a week, and then you're not there for another 6 months, sort of situation. Yeah, residents really feel it, and it has a huge impact. So that's why, look, exception to the rule, of course, is you know, the one-offs with getting someone to the unit. That's the tragic one, isn't it? Like if you have a husband, he's angry, you're not managing at home, you need to get him into the dementia unit because it's not manageable. You know, he can't stay at home because it's too dangerous, or even more so often, you can't manage him with cares and dressing and showering. So he has to be in a facility, you know, even if he's not angry still. But, you know, if you say to someone at that point, look, you're going into a dementia facility, and tell them the truth, chances are, you know, they'll kick and scream and won't allow it. So you might have to tell a white lie at the start, something like, you know, we need to adjust your sleep patterns need to be adjusted, or medication needs to be adjusted. So you need to come here for that. You know, and that, of course, is a lie. But after that point, from that point on, all support measures have to go in place to support that person, and truth be told from that point, you know. And, you know, we'll do another video on that, I think. But the support, you know, the communication, going through everything step by step, as we've done in all these 100 or so videos, a lot of it in there, and, you know, and all of it in the books, especially in the second book, The Residents Rise. I've gone through that topic. You need to communicate and be on board with them from that point on, to have their trust and work with them on that issue. So thank you so much for your looks and your likes and support.